Hey, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This is a show all about farmers markets. Whether you're a farmers market manager, a farmer, or a food producer selling at farmers markets, or just a curious farmers market shopper, this is the podcast for you. This week's episode is the last in our series of Tent Talk live episodes recorded at the 2019 Intense Conference. The discussion on this episode is Using Our Voices to Create Change, led by Amelia Moore, Program Coordinator of the California Alliance of Farmers Markets, and Ben Feldman, currently the Executive Director of the National Farmers Market Coalition.
Next up are Ben Feldman from the National Farmers Market Coalition. If you're not a member of FMC, you should be. Check it out. They do good things for us, and they, over the last few years especially, have, I feel like, gotten a little bit more into policy things, and I think that's really important. We need a voice. The grocery industry, the big grocery industry, they have a voice. We need a voice. And Amelia Moore, who is from the Executive Director, yes?
Program
Coordinator, yes, of California Alliance of Farmers Markets. So she'll have good information for those of us from California, and actually a lot of that applies to all of the rest of you too, no matter where you are managing markets. And they're going to talk a little bit about the things we can do to make the voice of the farmers market heard when it comes to setting policy, to convincing your communities that what we do is important and that they should support it. And so we're going to let them take it away.
All right. Thanks, Kat. I can't really hear it. This sounds like it's on. Okay, good. Yeah. Great. Okay, well, welcome to our session on using our voices to create change. So we'll do a quick intro to ourselves, and Kat did that for us, I guess. Did you want to add anything else, Ben?
Sure. Why don't? So I'll just mention. Kat did most of my work for me, but the National Farmers Market Coalition is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have members in all 50 states. We have state partnership arrangements with markets in 24 states, including here in California, the California Alliance of Farmers Markets. This allows markets to become a member all in one fell swoop. So you get your state level support and you get your national level support all in one. As Kat mentioned, we have really recognized, particularly leading up to this year, it was a Farm Bill year, the importance of engaging in policy. There are a number of federal policies that impact farmers markets, and I'll get a handout. I'm not going to tell you. This presentation is much more about how to engage rather than the specifics of the Farm Bill, but we'll have questions later for that. Say anything about the Alliance?
Sure. The California Alliance of Farmers Markets, industry coalition. We have members that include farmers, small businesses, farmers market managers, market operators, and also nonprofits that are in this work and want to support the Alliance. So if you're in California, you're definitely welcome to join. Please come and see us, sign up. I'm happy to give first year free annual membership to anyone in the room. So feel welcome. And we focus on training, supporting market managers, building their capacity and professional development, policy advocacy, which we'll talk a bit about today, and promotions. We do a statewide promotion program to promote farmers markets to Californians and try and encourage them to go out and shop there. Okay, so you know a little bit about us. We want to know a little bit about folks in the room, and Sadrina did a great exercise earlier. It's something similar to ours, so bear with us because we're going to ask you to stand up as well. What we typically do with our activity is just ask you to stand when a question is relevant to you. So I want folks in the room who identify as a farmer, rancher, to stand up, fisher. And let's have a round of applause for our farmers because you guys are great. All right. Thank you. And if you're a market manager or operator and you're in the room, stand up. If you don't feel like standing, you can also wave at us. That'll also help. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Okay, and if you're a vendor at a market, a small food business or something like that. Yeah, great. Excellent. Thanks, guys. If there's something other than that that represents you that I did not cover, if you want to wave and oh yeah, of course. from the Certified Naturally Grown.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Questions about policy. Okay, so has anyone in this room ever sent a letter, a specific letter about a piece of policy and expressing your opinion? Have you ever sent that kind of a letter to an elected official? Great. Stand up or wave. That's great. Look around. Okay, so we got some folks in the room. Have you ever invited your elected official to your market or to your business or to your farm? Okay, a couple of folks. Some folks. Okay, does anyone feel like advocacy or policy is kind of like confusing, daunting, a little like bleh? Anyone? Okay, somewhere in that realm, there are some folks who feel that way. That's fine. We're going to try and help you not feel that way. We want to talk a little bit about some of the big policy issues that cover farmers markets, why we think, as little policy nerds, that everyone should care about policy, and we're also going to try and help you take some first steps to engage in the policy advocacy world. Great.
Do the next slide.
Next slide.
You already figured that one out.
Oh, I figured it out. Okay. It's that way. All right. So I think this was my slide for when we were going to do the activity we just did. So there's a picture of farmers market. All right. So too often in policy, what happens at the federal level and also at the state level, whatever state you're in, money is a huge political influencer. And so really what Ben and I are trying to encourage you to think about today is that in order to influence policy, we're up against big food, we're up against big agriculture, big soda. We call them big because they're big. They have the money, they have like tons of marketing people that spin stuff, where soda is doing like health promotion campaigns, and you're just like, what? So we have to compete against that. It's kind of hard when you're just one person. So what we want to talk to you about is the fact that we need to be the many. In order to have an influence in the political field, it's really important to be together and to have a number of folks pushing with the same kind of message. It's not to say that it's impossible alone, but it really is important. So a lot of things that help shape policy are demonstrated implementation of a particular program, and we can talk a little bit about the market incentives program in California, where that was being piloted, and it grew and grew, and then it was able to get federal policy to support that with funding. Another piece of that is that the more folks who are engaged in talking to their elected officials about farming sustainably, about local food access, the more elected officials care about that. And when we have more of us, we have then more elected officials that care about it, and we can start to really shift that paradigm in our favor. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just want to add, so what Amelia described in terms of the role of money, I think people talk about the role of money. The way it, sort of the reason this is the way it is, we have a system, a political system, that there's a set of rules by which things are done, and it's a complicated and difficult to navigate system, and it's not accidental that the system is designed that way. It is intentionally set up that way, and it allows those with money and those with historic power to maintain that power, right? And so it isn't necessarily set up for civic engagement. That is not how it is designed in the rules. It is very difficult to be an amateur and follow the full process, whereas there are people who get paid, they're called lobbyists, that's their job, right? That's what they do. So the response to that, though, is we do have elected officials, and they, at the end of the day, get elected by their constituents. So when their constituents say something to them, that is really the one antidote that we have, is this, as Amelia really rightly pointed out, it's numbers. It's our numbers, and we, as a group, whether we think about ourselves at the state level or the national level, one of our advantages is we're spread all over the place, right? We have farmers markets and farmers in I believe, every congressional district in the state of California, right? So that allows us to speak to a wide range of elected officials, and when, again, there's those numbers, then that's how we get stuff done. So that.
Drop the mic. Thanks, Ben. That's the point we're trying to make, though. Numbers, important. We want you all to engage with us. Another thing about numbers that is important is having data. And does anyone love Excel as much as I do? Probably a lot. It can be brilliant, but it can be frustrating. We're not talking about Excel, though. This is the number that I've got up here. What this represents is when farmers sell food locally, they create on average 13 jobs compared to a farmer that is not selling locally. And that is a lot of jobs. That's a lot of economic generation. That's a lot that small farmers are bringing into the community, and that's a lot that farmers markets are supporting. If anyone's interested in figuring out how to do metrics better for your market, you can talk to me or Ben about Market Metrics, which is a tool that the Farmers Market Coalition provides. We've been trying to implement that at our markets this year and found that I think over our peak season in one of our markets, we support over 550 jobs. And that's kind of great information that you can provide to your elected official, because they're looking for those anecdotal stories, that really move people, the human story. But often they're also going to be looking for the facts, like when the rubber hits the road, why should we invest in farmers markets, and why should we be supporting our small food systems? And so by collecting data about the number of people in the community you support, the number of farmers you support, the job creation that you're encouraging and providing space for, that can really help demonstrate your impact.
Yeah, so what I said earlier about not having, the process not being designed to be inclusive. So we there's numbers, and then so we have numbers going for us, we have geography going for us, and the other thing we have going for us is we're in the right. We are right. Like, our work is achieving the things that we as a society frequently say that we want, right? So when we can capture the information about what we're doing, we can really move things forward. It's great to show up there, as we said, with numbers. When you show up with numbers and data, it's really hard to push back against that, because it really demonstrates the significant impact of the work that we all do.
Great. And then the other thing we wanted to stress today is, yes, you can do advocacy, and yes, you should do advocacy. Any citizen can speak to their elected official about what you want to see them doing for your community. But also for nonprofits, yes, there are some rules, but really it's not going to limit you too much. It's to do a lot with the amount of money you're spending on lobbying, for example, and most nonprofits can stay well below that kind of limit. For more information, you can go to the IRS website, or you can go to one of these that we have listed. We sat down so that hopefully you guys can see the slides, but there's the Council for Nonprofits and the Alliance for Justice, two good resources for anyone who's interested in thinking about doing some kind of policy lobbying and wants more information about the rules. And was there one other thing on this, or just
I think the main
jump
thing,
through it?
is most of the conversations that you have with elected officials don't even fall into the lobbying category, right? You can tell them about your market, you can tell them about the impact of your work, you can tell them what you think about stuff. It really only becomes lobbying when you say, vote this way on a bill. So the most important thing is you really can interact with your elected officials, and we're really here to encourage you to do that. Don't be scared about it.
Yeah. And I think in terms of timing, we're going to have to squeeze through these so we can get into our activity, but you're up next.
So the federal farm bill, I spent the last 2 years working on it. It's got a lot of stuff that impacts farmers markets. We'll get the handout to you in just a second, but That includes, how many folks here have had or worked on a farmers market promotion program grant? A food insecurity nutrition incentive grant? How about senior farmers market nutrition program at your markets? All right. Value-added producer grants. Any farmers or vendors in here who have one? No, that one's also in there. So that's the breadth of what was there. So that's an important reason to care about the federal farm bill. It impacts the work that you all do every day. This 2018 bill that just passed ended up being pretty good in the context of what is possible within a farm bill, but it didn't have to be good. There was a period of time where it looked like it could have been pretty bad for us. There was the version of the farm bill that was introduced in the House was a partisan bill introduced by the House Republicans. It's pretty much the only time in the history of the farm bill where we've ended up with a bill that was not bipartisan. They passed it exclusively with Republican votes, succeeded in passing it by 2 votes. It basically really significantly cut down on SNAP, or would have, I should say, and it would have slashed funding for most of the programs we care about here. So the reason... What's that?
It didn't even include
It had no funding for the farmers market promotion program. Yeah. So then the Senate came out with their version of the bill, which was really pretty good. And the way we ended up with the bill that we have now is because, well, 2 things happened. One, we had an election, and that changed the political landscape. But also, market managers and farmers and vendors from around the country said to members of Congress, this is not a good bill for our work. And as a result, we have it's not a transformative farm bill for the kind of food system we care about, but by the measures of what's possible within our political landscape, we ended up with a pretty darn good farm bill.
Yeah. So like Ben said, we have a handout for you about the farm bill with more information, and also you can take a deep breath because you don't have to do farm bill advocacy for another 5 years. Or maybe 4 years. But really what we're talking about is how it's important to start building relationships with your elected officials today, especially we're talking Congress for the Farm Bill, but it could also be locally for you, state-based. So I wanted to go through a little bit for California. So in California, we're a highly regulated state. There are opportunities in some ways to kind of influence this during the policymaking process. Many members of the Alliance were involved in trying to shape the legislation that created the most recent regulations. Also, the Alliance, part of our role that we play, and you might have this in your state within the state association, is we try and stay on top of what's happening in the policy space and share that with our members so they know. We also provide letters, templates, so that they can reach out to their elected official to demonstrate why they want a particular policy. An example, this year in California, last year, there was a policy proposal to allow sidewalk vendors, to legalize sidewalk vendors, which in general is great. It's great because a lot of immigrants were being picked up by ICE based on the fact that they weren't meant to be sidewalk vending, and it was one of those casual economy things that folks were involved in. And so this was a way to sort of prevent that. But for farmers markets, it could cause a potential competition around a farmer's market. So what we did was try and advocate for a buffer of space around the market. And a number of letters were sent, and that passed in our favor. So we're happy that sidewalk vending is now legal in the state of California, and cities can implement a buffer space around a market.
As far as inviting local officials to the market, we've done that on occasion. Usually they contact us and want to come, and so they come and can speak to the community. But what's the best use of their time at the market? Like, in your opinion, what should we be focusing on? Because I'd love to invite more to come out to the market and really use that as an opportunity to discuss issues that I want them to address. But what would you say is the best way to kind of approach that, and how do I do that with elected officials?
Yeah. So I think that one thing you could do is, especially if your market's extremely busy, is think about having them come at a time where it might have a bit of a lull. Maybe it's like first thing in the morning, or building into the busier time, just so you have a bit of time to maybe go and meet with some vendors. And then I would also probably encourage you to like prep your vendors in advance, so that they know that at some point they might be pulled aside to chat to someone. And then if you're trying to achieve a particular goal, like maybe it's safety, and say you're a market where you're on an open street and there's traffic around you, and you might want some kind of fixed structure for safety with your market. Maybe, you know, you're demonstrating how busy the market is, and then towards the end you could like meet somewhere to the side or something and have that kind of conversation with a very specific goal in mind. But definitely including your vendors, I think, is really important, and any other partners that you have would be a couple of my first points. And then also knowing, like, if they're reaching out to you and they're like, we want to come, knowing what their goal is, and then thinking about the types of vendors or folks that you can draw into that experience so they get the most out of it. And if they're bringing any media, or if you're trying to encourage media to come, making sure that they put your name in anything they write, so that you benefit from that media as well.
I'll just add the in terms of what to talk about, you know, or what, you know, there's that can be anything that's important to you. It can be helpful to do a little bit of your homework and know what issues are of importance to them, but just because something isn't something that they've visibly expressed support for or engaged on doesn't mean that it isn't a great opportunity for them to learn and maybe that become an issue that they care about. Also, sort of to Amelia's point related to media, if you have a special event, if you have, and you know, politicians are politicians for a reason. Most of them really like to be in the public eye, so opportunities for them to be to do that are ones that they like. So if there's a way to give them a role, some sort of ceremonial role in the opening of the market, or in Connecticut, Representative Delora comes out to her local market, and they have this event where it's called the lettuce toss, and she throws out the first lettuce each year, which, I mean, it's a pretty like fun event, and that's the other thing that you all have going for you is your markets are fun, and compared to a lot of the events that they get invited to that aren't, you got a leg up. So a few things there.
Hi, I have a quick follow-on to that. At our markets, we have a annual thing that we do with every one of our elected officials that they come to as part of my thing the other day. We just call it Meet Me at the Market, and it's more like a town hall thing where it's not them coming to talk to us specifically about what's going on in the market, but we set up a booth, we do the whole thing. They come, their staff, they're there to meet their whole community. And it's a really great way to get them down there and get them what they want, which is to find out what's going on in their broader community and see the kind of engagement that you are fostering within the community. And you always have a chance then to just do your job, do what needs to happen, let them experience that community, find out what else is going on, and then you walk them over to the bollards that you don't have, or the or the kind of thing. But we don't shame them necessarily, but I'm delighted for this quick little one-liner, because we have a new assembly member who's, you know, and we get the advantage of saying, like, all of your predecessors have done this, and we haven't seen you for 2 years, so what the heck. But they do come, and they love it, and if you make that space available to them, they'll get in there. We have our congresswoman, we've had Senator Boxer came once. I mean, it's an invitation that they have a hard time declining.
Also, just to add, Erin told me yesterday that they have this big, beautiful bell, and every year at the start of the market, they get someone who's new in town in terms of elected or what it might be, and they ring the bell, and that's like a way to bring someone in to your market and give them something fun to do as well. I like that.
I was just curious about like what you guys are thinking as far as inviting elected officials, and we talked about a little bit as far as what they might want. So like, what's your vision in terms of kind of, like you're saying, is it more just general relationship, like so that they're more aware of what a farmer's market is and how they operate and what's going on in the community, or what's your thinking in terms of the goal and maybe the larger vision for creating these relationships with elected officials?
So are you asking sort of what our objective is, like what policy purposes we're trying to achieve,
or what you're trying to get across here, like as far as like if you're encouraging us to reach out, like find out who our elected officials are, invite them to the farmers market, like what are some of your thoughts in terms of your beliefs or experiences in terms of how doing that will create a happier, healthier life, world, whatever, that kind of thing.
Thanks for asking that question. I feel like we probably should have, if we didn't already answer that thing, we didn't do our job very well. So, yeah, it's about building a relationship with your elected official, ultimately because at some point you probably will benefit by having that relationship, because you can always go to your elected official and say, I've got this problem. If you've been in touch with them and built that relationship, they already have the context, and you don't have to start from zero. You're already you know who to talk to within their office, and they're more likely to be receptive to it, and it can be hard to make that ask, start at the beginning and go all the way to the ask. I was going to give an example, but I'm not going to. Go ahead, Amelia.
I'll give an example. No, I mean, I was thinking you make kombucha, right? And so you're a small business and you're in a farmer's market setting. And depending on who you were wanting to reach out to, it's really about demonstrating how an industry like farmers markets can help support small business owners develop their businesses. And then you can do it if doing it alone feels intimidating, partner up with some other vendors or with your market manager and be like, I kind of think that we should be talking to X person about how great we are for the community and for the economy and for small business owners. And then work together on something like that. And a key piece of it is also about, like Ben said, being known to them. So when it gets into a point where they have to make a decision about whether or not to put a safety bollard in the farmers market street, or whether or not to vote on the farm bill, to vote on whether or not to fund farmers market promotion, they might be thinking, oh, I went to my local farmers market and I saw these great people doing a lot of important work and I know them, and so they'll be more likely to vote, hopefully, in favor of the things that support our industry. And so it's not like you have to feel like you need to ask them for something. Obviously, sometimes people are short on time, so really giving them something can be valuable in terms of access to people, like Erin said, access to community, something they want. I think it would be cool. Yesterday when Sarah Marshall was talking about her hot sauce and does the training classes, I was like, if you do anything like that, it would be great to invite an elected official to come to your kitchen and take one of your classes, because that's a fun thing to show off that you do. Yeah.
We have a question right here, but I just was going to make a small comment. I can't think of how many times I've heard elected officials or people running for office saying, America's built on the backs of small business owners. And I think that farmers markets are such a great opportunity to kind of hold them to that comment or to that claim. It's made up of small business owners. So that, I don't know, just thinking that could be a good talking point or kind of a hook to get them there. Like, hey, you want to meet 200 small business owners on a Saturday? It could kind of just be an opportunity to get them there. And we have a question right here.
If I could just add sort of part of the reason we're suggesting an invite to your business or your market is it's one thing to tell an elected official about your business. It's another thing to show them it. So much of the work that we do is either complicated or difficult to explain, or you don't get a full appreciation for the level of work or passion that goes into these things without seeing it in action.
This is our first time at this conference, but is this an organized group, or would you be stronger by being an organized group and have a bigger voice with the elected officials?
Yeah, so I mean, being part of coalitions and groups is definitely powerful. Like with the California Alliance of Farmers Markets, there are times where we will draft, myself and with input from my steering committee, will draft a letter of support for a state policy or maybe even the federal policy. And we've had other markets sign on to it, so it's a kind of letter saying this is what markets generally feel about this particular policy, and then a bunch of other markets have signed on to demonstrate that too. So for most of the market managers who are members of our group, it's not a lot of work for them. They just have to read the letter that I've written, decide if they agree with it, and agree to sign on. Also, like, we work with the Farmers Market Coalition, and Ben and his colleagues are much closer in terms of being in DC. Ben's not in DC all the time, but when he is, he's really there, and connecting with members of Congress. Also networking with other national groups that work on the Farm Bill. A lot of our work is in coalition on policy. So I think, yes, like doing your own kind of outreach can really support your business, but also, yeah, working in partnerships with others is really important. So either doing it as a market or as a region as well, or a city or something.
Yeah, and the reason I want you all to do this, to invite your elected officials, is one, it's good civic engagement. It's, elected officials need to hear from this community regardless of what they have to say. Also, some of it's really self-serving and selfish, because when I need to get some piece of legislation dealt with, I'm going to be calling you guys about your elected officials who you have relationships with because you invited them to market. But I say that in jest, but the point being, the way in which we achieve our success is by working through members who are in individual locations. And that example of the Congresswoman from Connecticut, she doesn't really care what I have to say unless it's a good policy idea, but she cares about her market. And when we need to get Representative DeLaura to vote a certain way, typically I don't contact her office, I contact the market.
And we also had experience last year. A group of us, including Erin, who's in the room, went to DC for a conference, and we went to Rep. Jeff Denham's office. And he wasn't any of our representatives, but he was. We had a member of the Alliance in Modesto, and he was part of their group. And we kind of were trying to talk to him about the Farmers Market Promotion Program, and that wasn't something like. He votes very much in party lines, and then he got voted out in the last election, so that's probably why. He didn't support farmers markets. But thank you for listening to us and for engaging in our activity, and we really hope that you connect with your policymakers and work together on that too.
Hey, thanks for listening to another live episode from our Intense Conference. Please leave us a review on iTunes and let us know how you liked today's episode. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss the next one. And if you want more farmers market tips, you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter at intensebusiness.com and follow us on Instagram at intensebusiness. That's INTENTS business. The 2019 Intense Conference was such a hit. Please keep in touch with us via social media and keep an eye out for exciting news about what's next for Intense.
This podcast is produced by Intense Business, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Justine Marzoni Mead. Original music by David Mead. Special thanks to San Diego Markets and the Intense Conference.